Hey everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations. You're with Simon today. And in this very short video, I'm just going to answer a question that somebody had written to me in an email regarding the placement of Pluto. And in particular, when the placement of Pluto is sitting on the cusp of another house, and how do we interpret that? So I felt like this was a great opportunity to create a video and to distribute this knowledge across a vaster field of like people that can hear it. Hopefully, some of you that have got similar situations that are looking for this type of answer, this video can help you in that sense. Okay, so let's look at the situation, right? Everybody can see the chart in front of me, the wheel, okay, the astrological wheel. Everybody can see that there are 12 house placements, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so we go around, right? And when we want to look at the house placement, firstly, what we want to do is we understand that the houses, to me personally, reflect a karmic dynamic that's personal to you. It's a way of understanding the personal relationship that your soul carries in this lifetime. So wherever you have planets in the houses and their aspects and their connections that they're making to other asteroids and other planets will reflect a very strong karmic and psychic dynamic that you carry in this lifetime. Okay, so the house is representing something that's more personal, which is something that you generally only get access to when you have the time of birth, which is why it's important to try to get your time of birth as close to the time as possible. Then, as you can see on the top over here, we've got all these constellations, okay? And they're actually representing the same. The constellation is representing the same as the house system, okay? Now, in this picture, in this drawing, in this chart, each house has its planetary, has the sign ruling it. So the first house of the astrological chart is the same as the constellation Aries. It all represents the way that we respond to life through natural instinct, not without thinking. It's like we just respond to it. And that natural impulse actually reveals to us quite a lot of depth around the nature of our Pluto in our chart, okay? So you can see here that the first house in Aries is ruling it, right? But of course, when you look at your own astrology chart, you'll notice that for many of you, you'll have, say, for instance, Aquarius on the cusp of the first house, or you'll have Scorpio on the cusp of the first house, meaning that if you have Scorpio on the cusp over there, then you'll have Sagittarius on the cusp of your second, generally speaking. Some of us have got intercepted signs and so on and so forth. But overall, what we're looking at here is that each chart might not necessarily have the sign ruling a house cusp, okay? And that's where you get an astrologer, where you develop your ability to mesh together the information. How does a sign with a planet operate? Okay, so what we're dealing with here in this sense is we're looking at the signs and we're saying that these correlate to the evolutionary dynamics of the soul, okay? So if, for instance, you had Pluto in the first house and it was in the constellation Scorpio, right? Then that Pluto symbol, that Pluto planet would be evolving through the Scorpio constellation, okay? If you had, say, for instance, Venus in your 8th house, but Venus was in Aquarius, then you would be evolving that Venus archetype through the Aquarian dynamic, okay? And so the signs on the outside reflect the evolutionary dynamic that the planet is evolving itself through. So I'll give you an indication of how it works in my chart. Okay, I have Venus in the 8th house. So I essentially have Venus in Scorpio, right? I have my karmic dynamic and psyche is orientated towards Venus archetypes with a Scorpio lens through it. But when I look at the sign that is actually ruling the planet itself, I notice that it's Virgo. So the nature of my Venus Scorpio element is being evolved through the constellation Virgo, which is the dynamic of maturity and growth and looking at things, introspection around this. And it's quite interesting because when I look at what I carry on a soul level and what is triggering growth, I can actually see that it's the Scorpio archetype that's being that I carry as an archetype. And then whenever I'm needing to kind of like understand deeper about what that is, it's always coming through a Virgo lens. Always through people, through, you know, people outside of myself will play that Virgo part, or I'll need to respond to it with Virgo clarity and such. So that's something that's really interesting. Okay. Now, the next one, which is what the video is mainly about, is then understanding the placement of Pluto in the house. Okay. So if you have Pluto situated in the 10th house of the astrological chart, right on top of the MC. So let's say your Pluto, let's say your MC is 25 degrees Libra, and your Pluto is situated at 25 degrees Libra, and it's on the 1st and the 10th house. To me, and how EA looks at this, is that it says Pluto is either going to be in each house, or one or the other. It's not going to like correlate to a blending of the two, unless it's exactly like to the second, right? And the way that you would interpret this is that if, for instance, Pluto was 25 degrees and 55 seconds, so that landed in your 10th house, you'll essentially be 10th house Pluto. Now, the thing to understand about this scenario is that we don't take the chart and say, okay, it says 10th house Pluto, so therefore I'm a 10th house Pluto. We go, let's understand what 10th house Pluto dynamics are about, and then look at my own life and say, do I see those dynamics in my life? So what you're doing is you're actually using the chart to objectify the nature of your own inner story versus giving the chart authority and then subscribing to the process of whatever that, you know, whatever dynamics have been, you know, suggested to you in articles and so on and so forth. You get what I'm trying to say here, right? So it's about looking at the chart and then objectifying your own nature and interacting with that instead. So that's the way that I would interpret it. And from that point, you can then begin to say, okay, well, so I have 10th house Pluto as an example, and I read about the 10th house Pluto experience. I notice in my life that these themes are very strong. Okay, so I've got a 10th house theme. From that point in time, you can then say to yourself, now what does that mean on an evolutionary level? And that's when you can like actually just let go of the astrology completely and begin to work on the dynamics of those themes, because you already have used the astrology to access the part of yourself that you're seeking. Seeking. Now, for instance, if you've got like Pluto at the cusp, right, over there, as an example, and it sits, say, for instance, now right at the end, but it's still in the 10th house, you apply the same concept. It's like, okay, my Pluto's on the cusp, it's right on the 11th, same thing. Is it in the 10th or the 11th? All right. Now, if Pluto is situated right in the beginning, generally speaking, you're probably going to just be beginning this lifetime. Okay. And this is the first kind of like incarnation in which you're probably becoming aware of the 10th house material. Whereas generally speaking, when you've got Pluto at the end of the cusp, this is a lifetime in which you've probably come to completion. So there's a lot more that you're teaching than you are learning in that sense. But it's not necessarily that you're not learning all the time. You're just more in a role of your life and people around you, and the knowledge you carry in an intuitive level is probably more developed in that area. And you start to notice that it becomes a lot easier to display 10th house material than it would be for somebody that is beginning the phase over there. So like I said, with somebody with Pluto in the first house situated right at the end over there, they would probably have more of an understanding of the nature of what their desires are and what they're seeking than somebody that has a first house Pluto that sits right in the ascendant and says, oh my God, I have no idea who I am. You understand? Okay. Cool, guys. So I hope that this video gave you some information on how to interpret this. And as always, if you've got some questions for me that is related to understanding astrology, then I'd be happy to create videos and respond to that. Other than that, have a fantastic day. Take care. Bye-bye.